Thank you. It's so good to be with you today for Will's talk. I'm really eager to introduce you to Will today. Will is somebody that I've known for a number of years through my work at the University of Michigan. Both my wife and I have long friendships with Will. My wife Simone and Will worked together for a number of years in the student life division at the university. And that's the main relationship here. But I had my own little relationship with Will over the years. I'd see him on a regular basis in the coffee line at the Starbucks in the Michigan Union on many mornings. And even though it's tougher to build a relationship on 1 minute, 2 minute conversations in a coffee line, I think we did pretty well. He's a fine gentleman, and he's here today to talk to you about transgender issues and also talk to you about the Spectrum Center. And we've used that in our promotion, but I want you to understand that this is a service for the LGBTQ plus population at the University of Michigan. And it is, in fact, the oldest such service at any university in the country. They're currently celebrating their 50th anniversary. So we're really proud for this association, pleased to be in a community that offers such support to the LGBTQ plus population. And let's learn more from Will today. Will, Sherry, welcome to First Presbyterian Church.
Brad, thank you so much for that very kind introduction, and Mel for the invitation and for the opening prayer. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to share with you all a little bit of conversation about LGBT community, and I have some slides. And so I'm going to share my screen and just talk through some different concepts and terminology and services that we provide and many centers like ours provide. And I'll share a little bit about the Spectrum Center as well. So I will be sure to leave time for questions. And feel free to try, to get attention in any way if I go over something and you want to slow down. I'm very open to that. As far as when we get to the question and answer, but also throughout, just want you to know that you can ask whatever questions you have. That I know I'm coming into a space to be a teacher and guide through conversation. And if you don't have the terminology or know the exact word to use, that is perfectly fine, because that is what I'm here for. And that we're going to kind of talk through that together. And that is, that's a big part of, what I want to be able to offer. So don't hold back because you're not sure, how to ask something or exactly what to say. I know that we're in a place where all questions are coming from a desire to learn and know more. And that's really what is important here. So I'm going to share my screen and get started. Let me just try that one more time. Okay, let's see. Can you see, I'm going to put it on a slideshow. Brad, can you see that? Because I can see your in my screen. Perfect, ML. Okay, perfect. So this is going to be somewhat of an introduction to LGBTQ, and we're going to talk about that acronym. Identity is an inclusive language with a focus on transgender and similar identities. So In getting started, I always like to share a little bit about the Spectrum Center. Brad already shared some, so that's really helpful. We are celebrating our 50th anniversary. You can see on my backdrop our nice logo, and we are absolutely very proud of the fact that we are the first center of our kind in the country. That when we opened in 1971. And Jim Toy and Cynthia Gare were our co-founders. I could do a whole session just on history. Many of you, I'm sure, know Jim, and we're friends and perhaps chosen family. And so he is greatly missed. Those of us that have been presenting since his passing are trying to embrace the emotion. I don't think I can get through this slide yet without a few tears in my eyes. So I think we all miss him, but he made a tremendous impact on our center, on our staff, and on our campus and wider community. So we just try to live out his mission still. And the mission that he and others formulated with the Spectrum Center. You'll get all of these slides. So I want to encourage you to listen and look, but no, you don't need to remember every detail on the slide. I'm happy to share all of this with you. So our focus at the Spectrum Center is really on enriching the campus experience. We focus on campus climate and supporting students and educating our community so that we can be an inclusive and welcoming place for students. We have 6 full-time staff members that work in the Spectrum Center, and we also have graduate interns and undergraduate students. The amazing part of being a part of a university and a part of a place like Ann Arbor. We have so much around us to support our center. The types of programs and services that we have are drop-in groups, mentorship programs, clothing closet events, speakers, graduations, workshops, all kinds of things that go on throughout the year that create the type of community that we promise here at Michigan and in Ann Arbor that a student is going to have if they choose U of M as their school and as their home. And so we often are going off campus to our partners and bringing education into those spaces. I will say our campus work has gotten busier and busier. And so it's a real pleasure to be able to be off campus and with you all in that way. I'm going to kind of just move into our content, sort of the foundations of the workshop. So I want to start with language. That you will hear terms like LGBT, LGBTQ. We've already used them, and we've just gotten started. And these are terms that you might hear interchangeably. You may also hear people refer to themselves and their community using the word queer. And I know that term can be very jarring. That term is historically and continues to be used as a slur, and that many people in an LGBT community also use that term to describe themselves, and that can be very complicated. I am not going to use that term in this workshop today. I am going to go with the term LGBT and LGBTQ when I'm referring to an entire community. And that's really common in our workshop because we tend to like to use language that's sort of least harmful for anyone that might be a part of the workshop. And so I do want to speak to it though, because people often have questions like, why are people using that term? And we're going to talk about it a little bit as a term and why it's useful, but I'm not going to use it to reference the whole community today. So that's just a little bit about language. So what is this acronym? What are we even really kind of talking about here? So some terminology. We want to make some basic distinctions between some concepts, and that will help us understand the acronym LGBT or LGBTQ. So the first concept that we want to focus on is sex assigned at birth. So this is a classification, right? Often decided based on external genitalia. I have kids, so I know when my wife was pregnant, there came a time where they're like, "Do you want to know the sex of the baby? Do you want to know if it's a boy or a girl?" Right? This what we call sex assigned at birth. What goes on a birth certificate. So and I'll use myself as an example throughout. So I'm someone whose sex assigned at birth is female. So on my birth certificate, when I was born, there's an F. My parents found out at some time they're having a girl, all of those things. This can also obviously is based on things like chromosomes and hormones, but we often aren't necessarily looking at those things deeply for everyone, unless maybe there's medical reason to. I want to separate sex assigned at birth from someone's gender or gender identity. This is someone's internal sense of self. This is not decided for me based on my sex assigned at birth or my body, but it is who I know myself to be and my understanding of sort of men and women and masculinity and femininity and everything in between. It's how do I understand who I am in relation to those things? So for me, I'm someone that understands who I am as a man. Really for a long time, but also really, when we really are scared to know something about ourselves, we can like push it down so far that we almost don't know. That is really a lot of my experience. So when I look at my understanding of myself as a boy, I can remember being really young and I had really short hair and I always wanted to sort of present. I was more comfortable that way, looking more what people would call masculine. And then I remember knowing at some point, probably like 7, that like I was not going to grow up to sort of represent how I felt, and that in order to get by, I'm going to need to align to what people expect me to be. And so I had an internal sense of self, but it's not always super present, right? Because there's expectations. There's expectations around how we express and how we enact gender that are often based on our sex assigned at birth. So my family really expected me to express and enact things that were feminine, to have long hair, to dress in clothes from a girl's department in a store, to participate in activities that were mostly for women and girls in my family. All of these kinds of things that are activities that we place, gender on. The interesting thing about gender, though, is that it's really like social and cultural, right? It's not really the facts that we think it is. Like girls have short hair. Well, many cultures or long hair, that's not the case, right? That we kind of operate around gender like it is attached to our physical body and our genitalia and our chromosomes and our hormones. But actually it's a force outside of that are social rules that, like many things, that we follow in different ways and actually see very differently. I always use the example, I'm a New Yorker. I was born and raised outside New York City. I'm someone who comes from an upper class home and community. I was raised, my father is Jewish and my mother is Catholic. I was raised in an interfaith household. My wife grew up in Michigan, identifies as growing up poor. How we understand, identifies as Christian, how we understand masculinity and like what we assume men know how to do and don't do is very different. Very, very, and it always makes me laugh. Like, you know, I think she grew up seeing men fix things. And I did not have that understanding of masculinity. I don't think I've ever seen my father fix anything. And so these things that we attach to like men and women are not necessarily true in the way that we have learned them to be. And that means we have to do some unlearning. It's not just about learning new information, it's actually about unlearning bad information and information that's not super accurate to everyone's life. That doesn't mean that some of us don't align to 90% of the things that might be expected, or 70 or 50 or 0. We're all different in that way. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a real blessing, really. And then attractionality is the last concept. You probably have heard of like sexual orientation or sexuality. That is exactly what this is someone's attraction to others. That could be emotional, physical, sexual, spiritual, lots of ways that people have attraction to others. And when we're talking about the LGBT community, I want to kind of go through that acronym, because what it does is it kind of conflates a lot of these concepts and it makes it really confusing. So the L stands for lesbian. When we're talking about a lesbian, we're talking about a woman attracted to other women. That's in this last bucket of attractionality or sexual orientation. When we talk about gay, the G, or bisexual, same thing. We're talking about who someone is attracted to. When we talk about the T, we're actually talking about the gender box. Being transgender is like I am, someone who is born sex assigned female at birth and identifies as a man. That's talking about my gender. Things like masculinity, femininity, men, women, people who are non-binary, and we're going to talk about that. That is different from who someone is attracted to. It's just a different piece of identity. And we have so many identities, right? I'm a parent, I'm a social worker, I'm transgender, I am a husband. So many things that make us who we are. And so the term LGBT has in it both people who identify around sexuality in a way other than heterosexual. So people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual. And it has in it people who identify as a gender that is not what they were assigned at birth. And so it's an acronym that like kind of brings these two different identities together under one umbrella. And that umbrella is created because of a lot of the experiences that LGBT people have around marginalization kind of come from the same places. Expectations around gender, who one should love and marry. You know, a lot of the roots of these things are similar when we think about why people experience harm who are in these communities. And so that's kind of the LGBT umbrella, and it brings together these different pieces. I'm going to focus today on the gender piece of that umbrella, focusing really on transgender and non-binary people. We're going to talk about these terms that I have here. So the term transgender, trans is a Latin prefix meaning across. Cis is a Latin prefix meaning on the same side. So I am someone who's transgender. My sex assigned at birth was female, and I identify as a man. Hence the across in that reference. Someone who is cisgender is someone who is born and their gender aligns in the expected ways with their sex assigned at birth. So someone who is born sex assigned at birth female and identifies as a girl and as a woman. That is someone who is cisgender, meaning on the same side as. That term is important because if we don't have a term for cisgender people, we often will rely on saying things like, I'm just a regular woman. I'm just a normal woman. We will sort of preference this norm. And by doing that, we kind of are saying this other thing is not as normal. What it is not as common. It's not as common. But we don't want to give a value to that. We want to have a word to describe people who are cisgender. So my assumption would be many people on this call are cisgender. The term non-binary is someone who doesn't identify as a man or as a woman. So in my example of myself, I'm transgender, but on a form that asks me my gender and it says man, woman, I can select man and feel like that is 100% accurate. I am perfectly comfortable with that box. That's how I talk about myself. That's who I am. For someone that doesn't identify as a man or a woman, when they're given those two options at the doctor's office, like check one or on campus or anywhere, they're not seeing themselves in those two options. They're saying, but my identity, my gender, when we look back at this box of gender, my internal sense of self isn't as a man or as a woman. It's neither of those things. That I don't feel like I am either a man or a woman. I am someone who's not in that binary. I am non-binary. And that's what that term means. That my internal sense of self doesn't align with either of those. And if you're thinking, that's hard to picture, I'm not non-binary. And I understand that feeling. Like, that's hard for me to imagine because I am binary. I do identify comfortably in this box. I am transgender, but I identify as a man. So some transgender people identify as trans man or a trans woman. And some people identify as non-binary, as not a man, not a woman. And they might use pronouns like, and we're going to talk about pronouns, but they might use pronouns like they, them, theirs, not he or she. And this is just some of what I just went over. Transgender, my gender identity does not align with the sex I was assigned at birth. Cisgender, my gender identity aligns with the sex I was assigned at birth. And non-binary, my gender cannot be defined exclusively as man or woman. I might come back. It's so hard because I want to share it all. I might come back to this. Let me see really quick. Yeah, I have 15 minutes. I'm gonna go quickly. You're gonna get these slides, but basically what I wanted to share is that we know LGBT, this is about students, but we know LGBT people, all people, are struggling in COVID-19. We know that there's isolation and that there's stress. But I wanted to just share that for LGBT students, we also know that there is extreme isolation. 62% of students in this study that was put out by the Maryland School of Public Health, it was actually done by students with the guidance of faculty, said their living arrangements changed. 82% of them had to move back home. And we know many of those homes may not be supportive and inclusive environments, that college campuses can really be a safe haven for so many students who are growing up in not inclusive spaces, that people are facing real financial challenges. And these are all things on our mind in the Spectrum Center and in many organizations as we do our work. We also know that, that there's a lot of research out there that tells us what students and others, I think it's very expandable to others, need to thrive in community. And those are the things that we focus on in the Spectrum Center, and that we're bringing in some of the practices I'm going to share with you, so that you can also be agents in making affirming community connections. Isolation is rampant in LGBT community. Making connections with others is so important, and bridging people to communities and resources, and fostering pathways for civic engagement. Connecting to religious identities and spaces is part of that referrals. And then we work on, you know, being an inclusive organization is something that we all should be thinking about. And I know that First Presbyterian is thinking about. So how do we make sure that anyone that comes feels welcome? And this is incredibly important. We think about inclusive language when referring to individuals. So instead of saying, oh, all husbands are welcome, you know, all partners are welcome. Instead of saying, ladies and gentlemen, we say, you know, welcome everyone. We make little changes to make sure that everyone in a space can kind of see themselves and feel welcome. We work on not making assumptions based on people's appearance, and that is really hard. We are so trained in assuming someone's gender by how they look. And part of that is just little changes in our language, just little things that we can do to not assume that a woman in college is not asking, oh, do you have a boyfriend? Maybe their interest is not boys. You know, being able to still engage and ask questions, but just being mindful of the assumptions that we might be building in to some of those questions. Understanding that the nuances and use of terms to affirm gender identity and attractionality are complicated, and we're not always going to get it right. That, like, we're going to make mistakes, that we're not going to know that someone might identify as transgender and use a different pronoun than we thought. And we're going to make a mistake, and that's okay. And that we can apologize, and we can move forward and try to do better. We want to mirror the language that people use to describe themselves. So if someone uses a term for themselves, like I did today, it makes sense to use that term to talk about me, right? I used it, but we try not to place terms on people and assume that they're accurate. So I might have an idea that someone might be transgender, a student I'm working with, but I'm not going to say, how long have you known you're transgender, when they haven't even said that is how they identify. I'm going to let people sort of lead with who they are. And I think if you're someone, I want to say, if you're someone that has a lot of experience in gender and sexuality, being a model and supporting others in your community. Because I do this work, if I notice that someone has made a mistake, I can be someone that says, hey, I know that that we were short on time for that meeting, but I noticed that you said he, when this person actually goes by she. And I can be someone to be helpful because this is new for many of us, and we're all going to, we need help in that work. I want to wrap up before questions pretty soon to just talk about pronouns. And these are, I see them on some of our Zoom screens, how we want others to refer to us in the third person. things like he or she. I mentioned they, which is a gender inclusive or gender neutral pronoun. So it's not on the binary. It's not for men or women, but many people who are non-binary might use the pronoun they and them and want that pronoun used to refer to them. When we do make mistakes and we refer to someone as a gender that isn't accurate, really the best thing to do is apologize and then do the work to do better. Sometimes we feel really bad and we start apologizing, but then it can be like we're over apologizing. And we feel so bad, and then it just becomes awkward, and then they're apologizing to us for the mistake we made, and it gets just really awkward. So knowing that like it's okay and that you can apologize and move on and do better, and that opportunity is there to learn more and to do better. That we can model pronouns in our introduction. So I use he, him, and his pronouns. I didn't say that, but it is on my Zoom screen. We can do that in like your small groups or communities. You can practice these kinds of things within your working teams and all of those kinds of things. I've included some links here that you'll have that mypronouns.org is a really good website for just like a deeper dive into pronouns and why it's important to create spaces where people can share what pronouns they use and why that is important. I remember when I was transitioning and I was changing my name. Well, at first, actually, I wasn't going to change my name. Many people who are transgender don't feel comfortable sharing their birth name, but I don't have a problem with it because it's my middle name. So my birth name is Lauren, and I thought I would keep it because I know men named Lauren, who I admire greatly. I know Brad and Simone know as well, and I thought that would be easy and be great. But what happened was, you know, when you're trying to make a change and you're trying to help others see that change in you, and you have to like edge them along, it didn't really do that, right? It kind of allowed people to like continue to see me as a girl and as a woman, like my mom or others. And so for me, changing my name was important to actually more to help other people than to help me. But in a way, it helped me too, right? Because then when people used my chosen name, then they started using my right pronouns. And the feeling of being seen in that way is such a gift that we can give. It's truly an amazing gift. And so when you think about why is it important to use people's pronouns the way they want, even if it doesn't make sense or it's hard for us? Why is it important to use the name that they want to use, even if I've known them for 20 years by a different name and it's really hard? I think about that as an opportunity to give an amazing gift. You are being a part of someone's, being able, maybe for some of the first time, to feel affirmed and seen after what has possibly been a long, long time of having to put a physical costume on that isn't who they are, right? Use a name, participate in activities that doesn't fit who they are. And so it's really such an amazing opportunity to be asked to use my correct pronouns and use my correct name and be brought into that space for someone. And knowing that some people try on different names, they try on different pronouns to see what is going to make sense for them. Not everyone has clarity in all the pieces of their identity. I think we can all relate to that like we don't necessarily, I have 4 kids and they range in age. My oldest is 23. And then we have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old and a just turned 10-year-old. I almost said 9, which she would not appreciate. A 10-year-old. And you know, the way in which we talk to and with young people and bring people in to this conversation is so critical, I think. And we can model that as a space that they haven't seen adults creating for them. And can do that. And it's really powerful. It's a really powerful opportunity that we have. So for me, it's been really impactful to have people be able to see me for who I am and to be a part of that. And it does take work. Just because I'm in this work, I struggle too with these things sometimes. When I have a friend who starts using a different name or pronouns, it is hard and it can be challenging. And really what often people are looking for is for someone that's willing to try, even if we're going to get it wrong sometimes. To be in it and be committed to seeing people for who they are. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I think I've talked about a lot of these practices is my last slide. Engaging in self-education. We obviously offer things like this, partnering on events, connecting with campus or community resources, reviewing your own organization's materials and facilities. Do we have questions on our materials that are open and inclusive? Do we have events that are open and inclusive? Do we have bathrooms that are open to anyone? What is possible for our building? And I know buildings can be challenging. I know it all too well on campus. And are we comfortable asking questions when we're given that opportunity? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you all, and open it up for questions that you might have on anything that I talked about or things that have come up prior to this. Yes, Nikki, I believe.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for doing this presentation. Regarding pronouns, I have a daughter who's a student at U of M, and one thing that she said, she graduates this year, cross your fingers.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks. But one thing she said that she's noticed in classes is when professors make you go around the classroom and tell your pronoun, that makes some people uncomfortable because they're not ready to reveal their pronoun. So I think it's important not to force people to tell you their pronouns unless they present it to you.
Yeah, that's a really important comment that it's, you know, like many things, all about the facilitation of something. Mm-hmm. And that sometimes things get ahead of us, like your example, where people mean well, but actually it is, you know, making people have to say, am I ready to say this in front of everyone? When there could be other options. Right? Instead of going around publicly in the room, there could be other options. Like I'm going to send out, you know, a Google form that only comes back to me and just share back some info about you and pronouns is on there. You know, there's lots of other ways. So I really appreciate that, that comment. Thank you so much.
Will, just to add, at our church, we have these name tags that people wear on Sunday. And our diversity task force just got approval to have new name tags ordered that have personal pronouns on them. We can still fit the name with the pronouns, and people can choose to order new name tags with that if they want. They don't have to put their pronouns on any name tag. That's an option. If they can't afford another name tag, but they want one, we'll take care of that. And we're actually going to have a faith in action on this on Sunday, because we understand that pronouns are difficult for people to always kind of figure out. And why would we have name tags now with pronouns? So that's what we're going to talk about on Sunday. But you're talking about that's very helpful to begin our thinking as we hear this presentation on Sunday.
That's wonderful. And I really appreciate the depth that you're going to think about. Some people need this and can't afford it. And that is such a common theme in transgender and non-binary community, that people need things like medicine, like surgeries, like access to mental health care that can be hard to access. And when we can, even the little things, when we can take care of some of those things for people, that is huge in their lives. Barry.
Thank you, Brad. And this question that I have may be for you or Melissa Ann. I wonder if the bathrooms in our church are good for what you are discussing. And I don't know, Brad, if you've ever been in our church to know what our bathrooms are. So the question is, what should we do with our bathrooms, or what should they look like in a church building?
Yeah, Mel, I'll pass it to you for what your building looks like, and then I can give some insight into bathrooms.
Yes, that's extremely helpful question, Leslie, and something that we're very much discussing. We have traditional men's rooms and women's rooms, and then we have 2 bathrooms that are any gender can use them, anyone can use them. There's one on the second floor, and there's one on the lower level. As we go into our capital campaign in the next year or two, I feel certain that the diversity group will have some opinions about that. But at this point, we have gender inclusive bathrooms. For the most part, that's how it's been at our church for 195 years. However, I do think it's something that's changing. And, just recently we have to put tampons in every bathroom. The state of Michigan requires us to put tampons in the men's rooms and the women's rooms, which I love. And of course, in the all gender bathrooms as well. So that's kind of where we are with that right now.
Yeah, that sounds really positive. As far as the access to multiple spaces, and that's really what we advocate for, is that people have options. There are many people and many reasons why someone might want to be in a gender specific space, like a women's restroom. Knowing that trans women are women and may also be in that restroom. Just like I use the men's restroom, I'm a man. And that some people would prefer to be in a single stall or even, and on campus, we have a few multi-stall inclusive restrooms. So there are many people in the bathroom at a time, in individual stalls, like a public restroom, but anyone of any gender can use that. And that exists in East Quad in our gender inclusive living experience, where we have rooms and roommates that are not based on someone's sex, but anyone can room with anyone in that living community.
Remember the days when you could only find a changing table in the women's restroom because only women would be changing diapers. And I think we have come a long way from that, but we still have work to do.
Yeah, and so similar to some of the things we're talking about around, assumptions around who has what needs.
Thank you, Will. And sorry I got your name wrong there.
Oh, no problem at all. Thanks.
Will, I'm so captured by your personal story. I don't know how comfortable you are sharing a little bit more about that, but just knowing that you grew up in a family, as you described your parents and where you grew up, and to be where you are now with all these kids and working at the Spectrum Center, I'm curious as to kind of what that journey was like for you a little, and whatever you could share with us about that. I just imagine it's a pretty amazing journey you've had.
Well, yes, I'm very open to share about myself, and it's a piece of how we teach about the work a lot of the time, because I think it's helpful to have those experiences be a part of like the terminology. I am someone who throughout college was not aware of my own identity as transgender. I didn't have, I went to college. I was in college from, I graduated in 2005. And I was just realizing my identity as what I then termed a lesbian around my junior year of college. And it was pretty tumultuous for me, in the sense of I was not going to be cut off from my family, but I was going to be letting disappointment. So there was a lot of just, hope that I would be married to, not just a man, but definitely a certain type of man with a certain type of job, and all the things that my parents, set us up for, and expected from us. And so kind of coming into my sexual identity in graduate school at U of M at the School of Social Work is when I was really first exposed to transgender people. When I first really understood the term transgender. And it was in my first year of graduate school, it was in 2005, that I knew I was transgender. And I kind of made the decision that I was not going to act on that in any way, that I was going to really repress that and keep that to myself, because I had a pretty tumultuous coming out around my sexuality. That went well for a little while. It went well for a little while until it didn't. And things for me just really came personally crashing down. I got a job after graduate school at the Spectrum Center. So I was immersed in LGBT community and meeting with students who were taking amazing risks for themselves, like taking risks because they deserved it. They deserved their life, whether their family was coming with them or not. And I was sort of like watching myself not. And I think I just kind of realized, like, I either have to leave this space and not have this be so like in my face all the time, or I need to do something different. And I think in that, I know in that I had been seeing a therapist because, often when we are not sort of managing well, lots of things are falling apart. And so he is a renowned local therapist in gender work. And I found myself to him for other reasons, but I think it was meant to be. And so he kind of dragged me through where I needed to go and was very resistant in getting for some years. And then was able to really start to be honest with people around me and make hard decisions. I did. And not because of this, but because of a lot of reasons. I was married to a woman as a lesbian, a woman that had never been with men and didn't have any interest in that. And ended a marriage and owned a house in Ann Arbor. And just, things had to kind of crash a little bit and get rebuilt. And I met my partner who right before I physically was transitioning. And so I've learned to be a father as I've learned to be a man, because she was a single mother of 3 kids. And so we have one daughter through artificial insemination, through a known donor. So my daughter will get her donor's info when she turns 18. And then and so, yeah, I've been on testosterone. It's been probably like 10, 11 years now. So that's a little bit about, or more, I guess, more than that. But that's a little bit, the time goes, that's a little bit about me and the Spectrum Center and Jim and the center and the leadership and Saman have all been truly like, it's amazing to have a home like this church is for many people. Student life has been that for me, for sure. I know I have a question here as well as a question from Linda, so we can.
Thank you so much, Will, for
Absolutely. Absolutely. Linda, I'll take your question and then I'll take the one in the chat.
Oh, you got to unmute, Linda.
Sorry. It's been a great learning discussion here. I'm wondering if the Spectrum Center councils goes out off campus into local high schools and will offer counseling to students that may be struggling with this.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We partner, so the Washtenaw Department of Education, or Michigan Department of Education has an LGBT liaison that works with the high schools throughout the state. And so we often refer out to when it comes to high school, because we try to be careful around working with people who are under 18 when they're not a student of ours. But we have some great resources in some parts of the state. I will say there are lots of parts of our state that don't, and that we need to continue to do more outreach. But there's some great organizations that are statewide. MOASH, the Michigan Organization of Adolescent Sexual Health, is based here in Ann Arbor, and they are just a powerhouse. They are amazing. They connect to LGBT students all over the state. They do a yearly conference at Grand Valley that is, I think, tomorrow, actually. And some of my students are presenting there, some college students. So there is a lot to offer here in our state and connect to.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. And then just to respond to the question here in the chat, as far as people who identify as non-binary, some people, that is their perpetual state of identity. I am not, just like mine is a man, that they identify as non-binary. Some people, any people, men, women, non-binary people, may, shift and move over time. Some people certainly align more with a feminine part of themselves and express that one day, while maybe aligning with a different part of themselves another day, right? That's definitely possible and happens, that people are able to sort of like live out how they identify. So I would say, to your question, kind of both. Some people are identified as non-binary, and that is how they identify, while others may shift and change over time in how they see themselves or which part of themselves they most align to. I want to touch on, before I wrap up, just some of the topics that we all see that I think can be topics of conversation, in particular when it comes to young people. That I think that young people who are transgender are the topic of a lot of news and a lot of opinion, right? And what we know in the research is that when young people are supported by their family and by their community, it is life-saving. That young people are really at risk for, in general, but in particular, transgender youth, LGBT youth, and in particular, transgender youth. That oftentimes what we are scared of for young people is the ramifications of being who they are in this world. And that is a valid concern. It's one I have for my kids. My daughter was the other day talking about putting a rainbow sticker on her car, and immediately red flags. We don't live in Ann Arbor, and we live in Dexter, and I'm not saying Dexter is not a welcoming place, but I'm saying that we often go west of here, and that there's lots of different communities. And that made me nervous. And so we have to talk to our kids about the realities of the world while providing space and room for them to be affirmed. And that's not going to look one way. Maybe that looks like, I'm going to call you by your name and pronouns from the second you step in this house to the second you step out of it. And then we're going to go from there because it's just not safe. Right. But being real with ourselves about our concerns so we can be honest in what is best for young people, which isn't shaming or isolating or hiding. And that affirming a child's gender, children don't engage in surgery or hormones before puberty at all. And at puberty, we're often talking about puberty blockers that delay puberty so someone can get to know themselves better. So the things that we're talking about often and scared for sometimes just aren't the worries we maybe need to have, and that our worries could be better placed. There's plenty to worry about that's very, very real. And affirming young people and making them transgender is not one of the worries. Creating space, enough space for them to actually know who they are. That was what I really missed out on, was any space to know who I was before I'm married and, in living a life in that way. So that's some of what I just want to kind of wrap up with, is just that importance of giving young people space to say who they are. And we all need that reminder as parents. I can't say I'm good at that all the time. So yes.
Simone has a question, yeah.
Thank you, Will. Because I've had the privilege of working for so long with Will, I just wanted to take a moment. As you can probably tell, Will's a very humble person, and it's also very humbling to work with Will because he is such a gentle teacher. Love is patient, and so is Will. Some of the things you might not know in terms of his leadership is that he not only is the director of the Spectrum Center, but he has institutional leadership for guiding how we think about, or I'm retired, so how they think about diversity, and that Will is a real institutional leader in that regard. The fact that we have made as much progress on bathrooms, the fact that forms now allow students to say, I see myself in this form, and now you can see me through this form. These are, they're huge advancements tangibly and symbolically of where we are going. And that has been under Will's leadership. And so I just wanted a chance to thank Will publicly for that, and for all of you in this community to know what an extraordinarily special teacher and leader he is. So thank you, Will.
Well, thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. And it's been wonderful to spend time with you all.
I want to say to all of you that, we have several members of the church, several members of this group that have transgender grandchildren, and we have several transgender members as well. And one of the things I've been really pleased about is that our Stephen ministers and pastors have walked alongside some of those folks that have had some questions and some struggles. Sometimes as grandparents, we are not sure our children are doing exactly what we think they should be doing when they are faced with these new issues that are emerging in families and among young people. And we are happy to walk with you through that and be there for you and listen and refer you to folks like Will or others in our community that do that work so well and so so gently. And so if there are questions among you that any of the staff or Stephen ministers can ask, please don't hesitate to come to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be happy to, be helpful in any way. So please do reach out.
Well, thank you so much, Will. I want to mention that our next Mature Ministries gathering is on Monday, Thursday, and it is in person in the social hall for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. We will have Karen, I can't say her last name right at this moment, but she is the cousin of Stacy Pacella, and she is a woman that you will have heard about because the Colgan airplane that fell out of the sky 15 years ago fell on Stacy's cousin's house, and her husband died, and she and her daughter escaped that fiery scene, and she's written a book about it and will be here on a very appropriate day of Monday, Thursday to share with us. We will have a catered lunch. We will do it as safely as possible. If you wish to watch it later or Zoom in, we'll make that available to you. But I did want to create this great excitement that we hope we can sit in the same room together soon and lift a spoonful of chicken to our lips and enjoy conversation as well. It may not be for everyone, but we do want to move back towards gathering in person as we can. Brad, anything from you before we end?
Yes, absolutely. We've got some great outings coming up for the Mature Ministries group. We're pretty much set on this month's outing to the Ford Rouge plant. But if any of you are feeling a little bit of spring cabin fever and want to get out, we've got a full day trip at the end of April to Grand Rapids for a visit to the Grand Rapids Public Museum in the afternoon and to the Fountain Street Church, Grand Rapids Public Museum in the morning and the Fountain Street Church in the afternoon with a nice lunch at Leo's Restaurant in downtown Grand River. Last we checked, we still have 20 or so spots available. So do yourself a favor. If you don't know these places, sign up and spend a day with good people.
Love it. Will, we thank you so much. I know that we're hosting Jim Toy's memorial service at First Presbyterian in May. I and Hannah will not be there because we'll be in Europe, but Jay Sanderford, one of my colleagues, Dave Vandermeer, our choir, will be singing at that event. You're going to get the full Presbyterian treatment when you come to that. Yes. I hope that you see many of these faces you're seeing today there as we celebrate the amazing life of Jim Toy and give thanks that you are the one that occupies that position now. What a gift it is to him and to that center and to us. And thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. We look forward to being a part of that, and you'll be getting some info of the next day's university celebration of Jim that will be happening that weekend when his family's in town for the interfaith service. So thank you all for hosting that. That was his wishes.
We're honored to do so. God be with you all. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mel.
Bye.